I was thinking of, after I went to talk to Bernie first, but I was thinking of calling SHPO also and talking to them and, you know, kind of seeing if they could, if they had any suggestions.
Yeah, that's true.
You know,
Yeah,
and I
Ben
thought
just,
about trying to maybe get legislative items, you
right.
know, from your local assembly or state senator or assemblyman, but I don't know about the restrictions because again, they're giving away public tax dollars. And so I don't know if that would be restricted for this type of project.
Right.
But if that wall fails,
Oh,
yeah. Oh. And I can't even imagine trying to get in there to fix it.
yeah.
Yeah, I know.
What a
Yeah.
chore that would be.
Yep.
Well, we can get started if anyone else joins. You know, we'll just kind of catch them up. This meeting is being recorded too, so I'll put it on the website under the project page.
Okay.
And anybody who's a member of the committee can view it whenever they want, and
Okay.
you know, follow along with the minute notes that you take too. So
All right. We always traditionally met at 6 o'clock, right?
yes,
Yes, we
yeah.
did, Wendy.
Okay, because I just wanted to make sure, like, oh, it wasn't 6:30, and maybe people are confused and they're thinking it's 6:30. But I have a feeling it's hard to get people back in the saddle. So
It is.
yes, I know. So we still have some stuff hanging out there. If you remember the last couple times that we met, we've been struggling with the issue with the Dyson agreement and the riparian rights around the creek and the responsibilities of the village with respect to that court decision. And where we left off with it is we had Keaton contact the village attorney, Chip Grieco. And so he started looking into it for us. And the last email that he sent to us, I will read it to you. We got this email from him on May 19th. And he said, so it continues to be a bit of a challenge to fully assess this very strange dam decision, which appears to be inconsistent with traditional riparian rights doctrine, which generally limits upstream owners' rights to continued flow of a stream in its natural condition, which obviously Ellicott Creek is not. In order to really understand the basis for the decision, we think it is necessary to retrieve the original papers from the litigation. Those papers should still be retained in the county's files, but they probably are not accessible right now. We're looking into when we might be able to get access to those records. And so Keaton, you were saying that Chip was at the recent village board meeting and he hasn't been able to access them yet?
Correct. Yeah, he's still working on everything. He's still looking through all the documents he has. So he said once he has a better idea of everything, and after he's gone through everything, he'll let us know. But he'll keep us in the loop. So.
Okay.
Wendy, could you just summarize that court decision? I understand the riparian rights in that, but when I was reviewing the minutes of the February meeting, which I did not attend, and saw those two words, court decision, I'm unfamiliar with that. So I just need a little information to know what this is all about.
Let me find it. Let me see. Actually, let me see if it's in.
You might be able to put it on the screen.
Yeah, and I was
this recent, or it sounds like it goes back a
Oh,
ways? Is
no.
this in connection with the Dyson letter?
Yeah, the agreement goes back to 1946. This is what we sent to Chip when we asked him to start looking into it. We said the most recent Waterfront Advisory Committee meeting, or at the most recent meeting, we had a discussion about the state Supreme Court ruling of 1946 that outlines the responsibilities of the village regarding the dam. While working on the draft of the policies and inventory for the LWRP, we noted a few questions that we are hoping that you might be able to answer. Number one, are there any legal settlements or court rulings that would supersede the 1946 ruling? Hello, Cheryl. Number two, do we have any documentation as to who owns the bottom areas of Ellicott Creek where there are no houses? This is the area north of Glen Avenue. Three, is it possible you could look at the attached portion of the LWRP inventory relating to the dam and flooding? We want to be sure that it's accurate. And then we gave him a copy of the Dyson agreement so that he could look at it. And he originally told us, he said, I've reread the original decision. I have not yet had an opportunity to consider its continuing import. I will not be able to get to it. He was busy, but then when he finally did, he realized it's far more complicated than we originally thought. But the agreement basically, there it is.
Yes.
The agreement found that the owners of the property on the west side of Island Park have riparian ownership rights. And so the decision set forth some responsibilities for the town. So here, it said, well, first of all, that the plaintiffs recover from the defendants the amount of incidental damages, because apparently there had been some flooding and scouring and bank erosion, and the folks that, those property owners, that's one of the problems, that reasons they were suing. So there was an award of, monetary award of $100. And then there was another award of $1,005.50 with interest that was to recover for the amount of their damages to their land as fixed in the sum of that amount. And then that the defendants be, and they are hereby required and directed to restore the banks, bed, and channel of Ellicott Creek to the former condition, positions, and level existing when they were torn away by the dam, what they call unit number 1. Okay. So the defendants are the village.
Right.
And that the defendants be, and they are hereby required and directed to desist, cease, and refrain from obstructing, changing, or interfering when so restored with any natural banks, bed, channel, level, or flow of Ellicott Creek. So, and then they go on to say that that the village, they talk about, let me find it. Again, there's some monetary payments. 60 days, they have to pay the $100, and then the $1,005.50 had to be paid. And then by such payment, the village shall acquire the right to maintain and operate its present flood abatement system, meaning Unit 1, which was the dam, as now constructed, and the right to divert by the operation of same not to exceed 267,000 gallons of water per day. That right there, it's how was that being measured, monitored? You know, how does one comply with that? And then the village shall maintain its system of flood control in good state of repair, so that the diversion by the reason of the operation of the system shall not exceed 267,000 gallons per day, except when the Unit 1 and its gates are in operation to relieve actual flood conditions. So when there's a flood, they can open all the gates and let more water out. Otherwise, they were limited to the amount of water that could be released probably so that they maintained flow around the island in full. So the court came up with this figure of 267,000 gallons per day. I don't know how that was determined, but they're saying you can only let so much water out. Then the village shall have the right to open the floodgates for the purpose only of relieving actual flood conditions. And the gates shall be closed and made reasonably watertight as soon as floods subside. So what that means is what the village has been doing is taking the gates out and leaving them out. And then they put them back in at a certain time of year. If I read this correctly, it's basically saying that you have to keep the gates closed unless there's a flood. If there's a flood, then you open them. Otherwise, the gates have to stay closed, which means there would be water going around that island most of the year. And then, what is this last one? The village at its election may proceed by condemnation to acquire the rights of the plaintiffs, but it must evidence its election so to do by a notice in writing to that effect served upon the plaintiffs or their attorneys of record within 60 days of the entry of judgment. So they had 60 days from, I guess, whatever date this was in 1946 to decide if they wanted to just acquire the riparian rights from those property owners, which I'm guessing never happened. So is there more? I don't know if that was it, Keaton.
I guess there is, yeah.
Oh,
There is
wait.
one. 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Let's see.
About payments.
Yeah, payments and the rest. Yeah, that had to do with making sure that the payments were made for restoration of the bank, of the stream bank. And then in the event the village elects to restore the bank of the stream, it may utilize same as a spillway at its election. The details of such construction shall be settled by this court on 5 days' notice. Let's see. I think I don't understand what number 8 is.
Right.
It's legal mumbo jumbo.
Yes.
So, but you got the basic points there that
Right.
the village was required to pay monetary damages to pay the plaintiffs back for monies that they had spent, I believe, for bank repair. And then they were to go in and restore the bank to its original condition. And then the settlement established the way that the village was to be operating the dam. But we know that that hasn't been happening. And I think that's why Mr. Dyson wrote his original letter to the town in 2009, I believe it was, Keaton.
Correct, yes.
So, complaining, bringing up the fact that, hey, this was supposed to have been done and you're not complying with it. So, yeah, April 2009, I'm writing to request the immediate restoration of the water to Ellicott Creek as directed by the judgment of the State Supreme Court. This says April of 1929, but what we have shows 1946.
Correct, yes. It
So-
shows, I believe it was April 2nd. It was dated.
Yeah, April 3rd. I'm hoping that if Chip can get into the county files, he can find everything. He can get all the original decision documents so that he can figure out where the village stands and what this means and how they have to comply. So that's where we can't really move ahead until Chip can get us that information.
Okay, thank you.
And you're welcome. So so that's really it. Let's see. On the Army Corps of Engineers reports, there were two things. There were older reports that Darcy was going to try to track down. I'm sorry, Lauren.
Yeah, it's
Sorry, that probably happens all the time, right?
It does, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Lauren Darcy is with the Buffalo Niagara Waterkeeper, and she was going to try to track down old historic Army Corps of Engineer studies that were done for Ellicott Creek. I want to say back in the 60s, but they were done early on. And then I had also been talking with Ted Myers from the DEC, and Ted had he was going to follow up. He had originally told me that there was there's a consultant that's been hired to do studies, and let me find my notes from him. There's a consultant that was hired to do some hydrologic studies here. Let's see. The DEC commissioned ongoing flood and erosion studies. And they hired a consultant that commenced their study of Ellicott Creek. And Ted was going to look into, he thought they were close to completing the section that they were doing that went from Stony Road to the Lens Springs area. And I talked to him a week or so ago, and he was going to check again. He had checked earlier, and it hadn't been finished. And so he was going to check for me again. But he said, but then he mentioned, let's see. He said that there had been studies conducted in the early 2000s. That's what what Lauren Darcy is tracking down for us. These earlier Army Corps studies. I mean, we wanted to see them just out of interest, if historically what they said about the creek, if we might learn anything. So Lauren, were you able to find anything?
So I found one study from the 1970s, and I realized that you sent me an email the other day that I just totally missed. So I'm going to send that link on to you now. I admittedly didn't get a chance to review it particularly closely, but it's the Ellicott Creek Basin Summary Report, Water Resources Development. I think that was what we were after from a historic perspective. I didn't find anything from the 2000s though. And, you know, I haven't directly asked anyone from the Army Corps, so that would be the next, like, you know, through the internet, I couldn't find it myself. So the next would be to go to the Army Corps.
Okay, so yeah, you'd have to call them.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Because it'll be interesting. So, but yeah, the 1970s study. All right.
Yeah, it's August of 1973.
Okay. All right. So, so we're still gonna follow up on that stuff.
Yeah, I'll call some of them that I know at the Army Corps tomorrow and see, you know, who the right person to talk to about that is.
Sure. Okay, that would be good. And then we'll see if Ted gets back to me with any more information on what he was able to find out, because it would be nice, even if the study doesn't go all the way down to the falls, it'd be interesting just to see what it does say for the portion that they did look at in the village. And just the study overall. There may be more general information that's useful as a whole. So, so we'll see where we're at with that. So, so right now our policies and our inventory will continue to sit on hold until we can fill in some of these blanks. So in the meantime, I thought that it might be helpful if we try to move ahead. And the next section of the report that we would be working on is the section 4, which is called proposed land and water uses and proposed projects. And if you think about the land uses along the creek and in our waterfront revitalization area, I don't think that there's any uses, any place where we would look at land and say, well, that land use should change. Most of it is public land or privately owned residential properties. And so I didn't really, looking at the map and moving along, I don't really see any places where we would actually propose land use changes. The areas around Main Street are commercial and should stay commercial. The parks should stay parks, and then the private residential areas are going to stay that way. There's really no vacant land where somebody could come in and develop. And if so, it would have to be done in accordance with the zoning. So even if there were some vacant residential parcels where there may be one or two, they're going to be developed residentially at some point in the future, perhaps. So we won't propose any land use changes, but there are projects, and we've been talking about a number of them, and we identified some things when we went out for our walk and that. So I tried to just kind of did a brain dump and went through the information in the inventory and that, and I put together a list of 2.5 pages of what I thought were potential projects that I wanted to go through with everybody. And all got this list, so I'm hoping that maybe you had time to take a look at it, but just some general ideas, and we'll, there may be things on this list that maybe everything stays, maybe everything doesn't. There might be other things I missed that should be added to the list, that type of thing. So this is just our first crack at it, but I'll read through them and we'll talk about them. So the first one was to create an enhanced trail connection with boardwalks where needed to provide greater access between the waterfront revitalization area and Amherst State Park. Folks had talked about that. There is an informal path right now, and part of the state park actually extends into the waterfront area, but there were some folks that thought that we needed a better connection. So that's the first one. So
I think that's a great idea, Wendy, from just informally speaking to a lot of people in the park, and that I see, as you say, on that informal path. That's a great request, that people would like to see something possibly with boardwalks linking the sections of the WRA to the Amherst State Park.
right. I mean, whatever happens down, you have to remember that we'd be putting something in a floodplain, and that it can't be anything that too complicated so that it doesn't wash out. So if we, maybe a heavier stone pathway or something along those lines, so that people can see where you walk, although they're still going to go wherever they want. And then in the wetter areas, maybe just some low boardwalks, but there's always the chance that if you get a good enough flood flow, they could wash out. But still, I agree with you. I think it's a nice idea. So the next one was to provide opportunities for cyclists through the establishment
So
of
quickly, going back on
Yeah.
at a community meeting, I did want to note that several people in the group that I had were concerned about overdevelopment of the trails. They
Right.
kind of liked that they were very natural and there. So
right. I mean, it's
and you couldn't do anything anyway. But
right. You're not going to go down there and you're not going to pave a path, and that's ADA quality standards and all of that stuff. It's just to, even if you blazed the trail, something that shows people where they go, and but just some kind of idea, because I agree with you, Cheryl. I don't think it should be something that doesn't fit with the natural character of the area, so it shouldn't be an overdeveloped, so the next one, Cheryl, I kind of did for you. as we talked about this. Having these opportunities for cyclists through the establishment of bike lanes or widened shoulders to safely accommodate bicycle traffic through the WRA. So whether that's Oak Grove or Glen Avenue or wherever, the fact is to recognize and make it easier for people to bike around the area.
I would add the term bike boulevard. That's something that is recognized. I don't know if it's recognized in Western New York. It's recognized in other places among bicycle advocates, and that's just streets where traffic flow is made so that it's more convenient for cyclists than it is for cars. And
I've seen that similar thing done for pedestrians.
yeah,
Roads are designed where they're actually more for pedestrian travel than they are for cars, and they actually work.
yeah. So in California where I lived, they had one that ran up almost, the different municipalities had put them together over the years, so it ran up almost the entire peninsula, and was very effective, highly used for transportation.
Mm-hmm.
So the GBNRTC is finishing up their bike master plan right now. I think it would, I can do this. I think it would be worthwhile to look at what they say about this, like what they have kind of in their draft network for this area, and see how what we propose can either fit into that or expand upon that.
So you're volunteering to check it out? Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because the biggest problem that we have is crossing the creek.
Yes.
Beyond that, it's actually pretty easy to set up something, but crossing the creek is something that's probably going to take a little bit of infrastructure because of the way that they redid Maine in particular.
Yeah. Okay. And I think I mentioned that later on in here. So establish pedestrian access to Amherst State Park from the end of North Cayuga. We had adjusted the WRA boundary. If you remember, up at the end of North Cayuga, there was a piece of vacant land that kind of goes down the hill and into the park. And so the comment was that some kind of pedestrian access should be established there. And I think that's a good idea. Any objections? Okay. Clean and deepen the pond system for improved flow in Glen Park to strengthen the long-term ecological system in the ponds, including the installation of adequate pond vegetation. Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Then we talked about this, was the establishing the pollinator corridors. And hang on one second. Okay, you can come in, but you can't bark.
Do you have a dog in the room now?
Well, he hears people's voices and then he barks. But he likes to, I'm in my office and he likes to sit in my office with me, so. Yeah. Okay, establish a pollinator corridor with more extensive native plantings on the village-owned lands along Ellicott Creek, east of Island Park and Oak Grove Drive, and encourage the same on private residential properties along the shoreline. And you would have to have an educational component that goes with this, but the idea is to encourage shoreline property owners to create these areas for pollinators.
So with that, so not just a pollinator corridor, I mean, certainly that's good to do along those, but I think along the shoreline, and you may address this, I mean, the planting of, native shrubs.
Yeah, that's
trees are what's going to be required to, and probably in the short term, sedges and things like that are going to be what's required to.
For erosion protection.
Erosion protection, yeah.
Yep, and I do mention that further on.
Okay.
Okay, manage invasive species growth on public lands along Ellicott Creek corridor and encourage private owners to do the same. Again, you have to have that educational component here so that you start to educate the public on what invasives are and the things that they should be yanking and trying to get off their of their shoreline and that. So, that's then a public education program to strengthen the prohibition on feeding of wildlife. So maybe improved signage. There was one community I worked with that came up with a program that they named it cleverly, "Don't feed the quackers crackers," kind of thing. But trying to educate people on that it's actually harmful to feed wildlife. So don't be going to Glen Park and bringing your bread and whatever and feeding it to the geese and the ducks, because it actually isn't good for them. You know, I saw somebody, it's on Long Island, I saw somebody put bagels in the water, which was actually mean because they get really slippery, and so the geese are trying to bite them, and it's like trying to bite an inner tube. Yeah, anyway. Tree maintenance in the parks, remove ash trees, dead trees, etc. Evaluate and reinforce walls in the vicinity of Glen Falls to enhance public safety. That one was, this came out of our public meeting, and this was specific to that area within Glen Park, right up close to the falls where people go and they kind of climb on the rocks and that. But an extension of this that has come up, and that's what Ben Villanen contacted me about, were the walls on the other side. We were talking about this earlier, Cheryl, before you came into the call, the fact that the walls on the east side, just above the falls, are getting worse. There's places where they're failing more. And the question is, how do we help the property owners? Because the wall's privately owned. And I don't know how we can come up with funding. You can't use public money for private projects. So I don't have an answer.
Yeah, that one's pretty tough because that's a pretty decent cliff there.
Yeah.
So
yes, I know.
that's some engineering.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a floodplain. It gets, yeah.
There is one thing though, and
Expensive.
Ben and I have talked about this, and you can see it. In fact, I just sent him some updated photos that I had taken. The original grist wheel, the property that has ownership all the way across the creek from east to west, and actually owns the falls. That property owner, and right above the falls on their property is where the hole is, and you can see the original grist wheel laying in there. And it's because that used to be the site of a grist mill, and that's obviously the historic wheel that's there. And so I don't know if that could be a hook, to help us maybe get some kind of funding for historic preservation or something. So that's why it might be worth, I'm going to call SHPO and just inquire.
Interesting.
Right. So let's see, we left off at establish an informal launch area for kayaks or other small non-motorized vessels along Ellicott Creek north of Glen Avenue. So I didn't realize that people kayak down there, but you all told me they do. So again, you could try to establish something. Don't know how long it will last when you get floodwaters that wash through. But even if you just establish an area and maybe put a sign, kayak launch, and that's where people can, they're doing it now anyway. So maybe just sort of formalize it a little bit. As far as above the falls, and I think I'll mention this in a few minutes, but getting a place, I think on Island Park, or maybe off of Oak Grove.
Don't do it off of Oak Grove.
No, there's no parking.
It's more, that's all private property there. And we have so much issues with vandalism and trespassing.
Yeah,
anyway.
I know. People coming across the
You're just
creek.
inviting it, and the village can't provide security. So
True.
you just don't want to invite that there. People come through, and that's fine. They come through on their kayaks, and most 90% of them are respectful or whatever. But I think when you
Yeah.
have a launch that's, you know, the
Yeah.
only place to go is private property, it's tricky.
Yeah. So the launch, if there was a launch site, it would have to be from Island Park. Okay. Okay. Improve the fishing hole area behind the Village Glen as a more formalized location for shoreline fishing. Someone suggested improving the access to it, adding more big rocks that people can sit on, stocking fish in that particular area. So I didn't know that that was a fishing hole, but apparently it is. So, so that was suggested. Better activate the area of Glen Park, north of Glen Avenue for public use. That's the area where the nature center had been. You know,
Right.
maybe I don't know if there's a master plan for that, or if the town and village have talked about how that area could be better used. But I mean, you could do more with it, whether you create an area for ice skating or barbecue grills or sledding, you know, birding, what have you. But
Yeah, right now.
Keaton, is that part of POP 25? Is that included, Glen
Some of
Park?
that is. I mean, even enhancing some of the nature play area and keeping that up.
mhm.
As far as the formerly Knoll Nature Center, we haven't come up with a different name, but as far as that goes, yeah, it'll still be an open air with some picnic tables there eventually.
Mhm.
As we get out of the pandemic. We don't want people sitting in close quarters, even though it is open. But
Right.
yeah, and you know there are things that we want to do in the future over there, but they're not part of Picture Our Parks because
Is that
Glen
what,
Park-
I was going to ask, what's POP 25?
Picture Our Parks 2025. It's a master plan that the Parks Committee has come up with. And actually, I can send you all the documents that we have on it so
Oh,
far.
that'd be
because
great.
It covers Island Park. It doesn't cover Glen Park because that's jointly owned by us and the town.
Okay,
So
and Picture Our Park 2025, who developed that?
our Parks Committee, our volunteer-run Parks Committee.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I'll send you all the documents on that. There's actually a link on the website to it, so you can just click on the documents, and if you want, you can save them to whatever drive you want.
Sure. Okay. We'll do that.
Okay. All right.
All right. But this part of Glen Park was not part of Picture.
Correct.
Okay.
Because Glen Park is jointly owned by the town and the village.
Yes.
So it
Yep.
didn't
Yep.
become part of the Parks
Okay.
Committee.
All right. Excuse me. You can't stand there and bark. You're gonna come back in and be good, but you can't stand at the top of the stairs and bark. He's
They really
protecting
can do
me.
whatever they want, can't they?
He's protecting me. Okay, install historic interpretation signage to celebrate or better recognize the historic significance of the Williamsville Mill and other activities that occurred in the area. In writing that historic section in the inventory, it just seems that there's so much history there, you know, and everybody just kind of focuses on, oh yeah, the pretty mill and everything. But a lot of stuff happened in that area. And I just think that there's a need to let the public know about that, whether you did it through some interpretive signage or some kind of things that you could post in Glen Park to let people know, you know, that because that wasn't the only mill there. There were other mills. And there were other mills actually in that location and stuff. So I threw that one in there. Okay, the next one. Identify a means of establishing a direct connection between the public parks in the waterfront area. That would be kind of hard. I mean, I thought about this one. It was mentioned, I threw it in here, but I'm not sure how you achieve it because the parks are You do have the walkway that comes up out of Glen Park, but then you're forced to go down and use the hawk signal to cross, and then get over back, to Island Park. I
So
don't
Wendy,
know.
a pedestrian bridge over Main Street would link that entrance to Glen Park, and with a short walk to Island Park, and from Glen Park you can get to Amherst State Park.
So a pedestrian bridge over Main Street.
Why?
Right.
I'm
Well,
sorry?
because we want to link the parks. We want to keep pedestrians and cyclists off of Main Street at that area. Those bridges have been used throughout Western New York in the past. Very effective. Yes, there's a cost. Yes, Main Street's a state highway, so you have tractor trailers, so you need the height, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a logical method to link those parks.
So you'd bring it down, you'd come up out of Glen Park, and then you'd go upstairs and walk across the bridge, and then it would come down on the opposite side of the street by where the new brewery is?
Well, that's a problem. Where do you cite it? And that's that's the problem.
And it changes the scenery. I mean, it changes the look of Main
Yeah.
Street. Main Street's not technically that fast right there.
And I mean,
so,
from a pedestrian perspective too, like bridges aren't usually the most, I don't know, they're not that much more comfortable of a walking environment.
sometimes
Right, but it's either a bridge or a tunnel. I spend the winters in the Sonoran Desert in southeast Arizona, and they had a lot of wildlife being killed on Interstate 10. So they built a tunnel underneath probably an 8-lane interstate now to facilitate where they knew it was a major crossing for all types of wildlife, and they all go underneath the road now. So I get it that it's not the most comfortable one, but Main Street is very fast around Main and Mill. The people accelerate tremendously so they don't have to stop for the light. And
I think that was part of the reason that the hawk signal was installed.
right. So
At
so
its
it's
location.
so then it's the hawk signal. Promote the hawk signal. When the village did a community plan back in 2010, I wrote to then Mayor Lother suggesting the pedestrian bridge to link the parks. It's just a thought, but you have to promote then. If you don't want the bridge, you have to promote the use of the hawk signal, but you still see people jaywalking to get from Sorrentino's over to the Creekview. So it's a tough situation.
Right.
Yeah, I think that cracks me up, especially moving from California, because you don't jaywalk in California, and that's not something that's allowed.
Right.
But they have the parking for
In
the brewery
California.
right across the street from the brewery, and as soon as I saw that, I'm like, here comes the jaywalking.
But
Exactly.
in California, they have regulations that we don't have. And that is, if you step out into the street, all the cars have to stop. Pedestrians have the right of way.
Only in a crosswalk. So
Crosswalk.
Technically everywhere, but in a crosswalk is the only time when the pedestrian also wouldn't be.
Right.
So
Right.
both would be ticketed, and
Yes.
they do. They ticket pedestrians all the time. You don't
But-
jaywalk.
But people know the rules and the cars stop. All you got to do is step
Oh,
in
yeah.
the crosswalk and the
I
cars
almost
stop.
died like several times when I moved here until I realized that they don't follow crosswalks.
They don't stop.
If someone's waiting on the side of a crosswalk, you have to stop.
Yes.
And people do,
Yep.
right? I mean, it's not,
Yep.
yeah.
So,
Yeah,
okay.
I don't know.
All right, well then, maybe, Nick, maybe that's the answer is to better promote the connection by way of that hawk signal between Glen Park and Island Park.
Right.
To do that, okay.
I mean,
All right.
in California, we use the pedestrian bridges, but I can tell you that they were usually over highways.
Yes.
And And they were incredibly, I remember the last one that they just finished building. It was 15 years in the making to replace a bridge that was already there and to put another one to replace a tunnel that frequently got flooded. It was
Well,
incredibly expensive.
yeah, they're very expensive.
Did you have to
So,
make them ADA compliant and all of
Oh,
that?
well, the way that I'm thinking about it is the fact that if we were to say, yeah, let's build a pedestrian bridge, that's going to be a project that's going to sit there waiting forever to get funded because we have other things that are going to become more important to do. And so,
Amhersty's one over the highway, but that's a different story.
yeah,
Right, like in
Right.
this situation, it seems to me like it's a traffic calming issue, right? Like the
Right.
road needs to become safer. We don't need to bypass the road, so.
no, and that's why they did the hawk signal. You know, I mean, they already did roadway reconstruction with bump outs and certain things to try to calm traffic, but you know, without a new way to get onto the throughway, you know, preferably from Young's Road, everybody's going to continue to use Main Street to get to the throughway through the village, and that makes it dangerous. So, you know, that's what the hawk signal was installed to help address. So you got it.
The other,
Promote it.
the bike boulevard, kind of those sorts of things are often used also by pedestrians is another way to give them an alternative route so that
Yeah.
you're, you know, mixing it up a bit too.
Okay. Next is evaluate the reconstruction or relocation of the Island Park dam structure to address flooding and erosion. This is the one that we talked about at a prior meeting, and you know, it's in order to do that, we have to have that hydrologic analysis of the creek, because you have to determine if you take out the dam and you use some other type of structure, that whether it's a weir or reconstructed something made out of stone, and you put it further up just above Island Park where the creek splits or whatever, if that, we have to study to determine would that be a feasible way to address the flooding and erosion and control water levels and allow the village to get rid of the dam and the gates, because the dam's got to be either reconstructed or replaced, and it's going to be, reconstruction will be very costly, but it needs to be studied because maybe there's a better way to address all the issues. So that's what this is really about. It's really to do the hydrologic analysis to evaluate, you know, how to deal with the dam. So I'll reword that, but that's probably one of the most important projects that we're going to have on our list, along with the next one, which is reconstruction of the weirs. They both are not working properly and need to be reconstructed. So that's also very important. There's no locations to safely cross Ellicott Creek to reach Island Park. A reconstructed dam at Island Park is a potential location that would also provide secondary access to the park. Or even if the floodgates were taken out, could that structure stay in place and be used as a bridge where people could come in from the hardware store parking lot to get into the park? But that all needs, there's more than one component to it. So if the dam stays, could you have pedestrian access over the top of it? If the dam goes, could you still maintain a structure that would allow a multi-use connection between Ed Young's Plaza, which is a couple bullets down, and Island Park? So these two actually go together.
Well, Wendy, aside from entering from the municipal parking lot,
Mhm.
Island Park faces all private property. So what are the
Right.
options for any locations to safely cross Ellicott Creek other than the one that currently exists?
The only
Because you
other
were talking
option
about
would
private
be-
property.
The only other option would, well, you're not going to do it from somebody's residential property. So
Or
the-
from the Ed Young's parking lot either.
I don't know that. You
Well,
know.
that's private property as well.
Right, but maybe the owner would agree to allowing a pedestrian access
So
connection.
good luck with that one.
You know, I don't know.
Okay. Well, you know, there's an island in Ellicott Creek Park in the Tonawondas with one entrance from a parking lot.
Yeah.
That seems to work very well with one entrance.
Right.
Is there an overwhelming demand to have additional?
I don't
access
know.
points?
That's why I wish I had more members that were participating, because I'd like to
Okay.
know what the whole group thinks. You know, 'cause
Right.
maybe, like I said, not everything on this list may stick. So maybe this is a project that drops off.
Okay.
And we
Thank you.
don't need to have that. But
I
I
think
need,
that had more to do, I think when we originally mentioned it, it had more to do with the need for some way to have cars, bikes, and pedestrians each have their own space to cross, right? So if there was a space for bikes to cross that didn't conflict with pedestrians or cars, or that was a wider pedestrian bike lane, because right now it's only the sidewalk. And
Right.
it's a narrow sidewalk, and so
And right now, I think there's a sign that says bicycles and motor vehicles are prohibited from using the park. I could be wrong, but I don't know. Keaton, do you know, was that a fact?
no, just
Um,
skateboards.
you can't ride your bike into Island Park?
No, it's just skateboards and rollerblades.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Island Park, you can ride bikes.
All right,
Lem-
thank you.
Okay, all right. So I need more feedback from others as to whether that is a good idea or not. You know, I mean, I don't have a problem with dropping it off the list. So then the one that falls in between those bullets is better activate or reinvent Island Park with improved amenities, more benches, picnic tables, grills, and or the addition of a water feature. Does this come out of POP 25?
Yes, that is all part of it, actually. That and a brand new playground, maybe even full-time stage area. So yeah, that's part of it.
So I'll look at that. I'll
Great.
go on the website and look at that. All right. Okay. Then jumping over the next one, then we get to establish a dock or pier area at Island Park to increase recreational use of the area for shoreline fishing or the use of small non-motorized vessels. So, you know, getting, I mean, there is that concrete pier area there. There was historically something there. There was a dock there or something on Island Park years ago.
I believe you're right, Wendy.
Right. I
That's
mean,
what
I have
I'm
pictures
told.
of it. We were looking at it when we were out there walking around. So is there a way to reestablish some kind of water access from that concrete bulkhead area there? So, okay. Then here it is, Cheryl. Addressing the shoreline erosion along Ellicott Creek, particularly the eastern shoreline of Island Park, through the installation of vegetation, creating a living shoreline, and reconstruction or relocation of the dam structure, see above. But either way is creating that living shoreline with the vegetation that'll help hold that shoreline in place. So that's a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, from a waterkeeper perspective, that would be a top priority for sure.
Yep. Okay.
And we're experimenting with our shoreline. They'll come in next week, which is a little bit late to install them, but not too bad since the water is high anyway. But we're experimenting with some different willow species that will deal well with the summer high water, but still hold things in place. We just got to fight the beavers for them until they get established.
Okay. Next is continue to implement improvements to mitigate inflow and infiltration issues in the waterfront area that impact treatment capacity at the Amherst Water Pollution Control Center, this is an issue, a bigger issue that has to be addressed. Addressing inflow and infiltration has to be addressed because the village wants to consolidate their sewer district with the town of Amherst and just let Amherst take it over. And the town of Amherst is agreeable to doing that, but they won't do it until the village addresses the inflow and infiltration problems. And they've been trying to do that. That's why the village has been doing a lot of these green infrastructure projects on Long Street and Spring Street and other places to get I&I under control. So then prohibit dumping of yard waste and other debris in Ellicott Creek. That would be a regulation that the village would need to put in place if you don't have something already. And mitigate the low water problems in the Len Springs area to reestablish sufficient flow. We talked about this. I think, Ben, somebody talked about when they redid Worley Drive, they messed up the drainage and changed the way drainage flowed. So they cut off the source of water that was originally crossing from the east to the west to the Len Springs Creek area. So that needs to be looked at, and we need to figure out how you reestablish that flow. So, all right, then there's a concern for water.
So, a quick question with that one, just as far as, is there concern that the change in water flow has impacted wildlife at all in that area?
I don't know. No one's ever talked about that. They just talk about that they don't like it being a mud flat.
Fair enough. I'm just curious as to whether or not there's other, spins to it, and I don't know how that impacts, all of the creek flow, but
yeah,
you can imagine if they really mess things up, it could impact.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's some. It's hard to imagine that there isn't some impact. Is it a positive, negative, or neutral impact? I think that's that's the question.
Yeah.
It depends. Are they going to fertilize their lawns next to the water if they get it?
Oh,
If not, then they get their mud flats.
yeah. Well, they'll vegetate them quick. Okay, this is, the general concern for water quality improvements in local waterways. This includes point and non-point source contaminants carried into Ellicott Creek waters. So the need to educate people on the use of best management practices and other things to try to do their part in protecting local water quality. And I know that Jane would support that. So
that was the top theme during the meeting. So
yeah. And that goes hand in hand with the next one, public education on best management practices for reduced use of pesticides and fertilizers, and I know Cheryl had emailed me indicating that in the spring, as soon as people come out and they start fertilizing their lawns, she can see the vegetation growth that occurs.
It's algal bloom.
Yeah, the algal blooms, right. Yep.
Yeah, so we have a picture of it that I took this spring, right when they get it. It's pretty impressive what happens, and because you can see the lawn companies coming around, right? That week.
Yeah. Yeah, and it'll all wash off into the creek and create those algal blooms. Yep.
So the other one that I'm curious with that one is, so technically it's against the law, but people are doing fill, and I still see people doing it, right? They're putting massive amounts of soil in their yard, or the other one's not illegal, but they're draining, they're putting in drainage systems.
Oh yeah, the pipes.
Right.
But are they actually filling the shoreline?
Yes.
Oh, then you should call the DEC.
Well, they're filling the floodplain. It's still legal, right? But they're doing it. It's our code. The code enforcement officer has to deal with it, but whether or not he knows. But I know because I went out and took a look at a property and, specifically told them that they couldn't fill, and they didn't put in enough that I think it would be, I don't know what they put in.
Yeah.
But people are putting in crazy amounts of soil over there on Cayuga.
Wow. Wow.
It's impressive to see kind of what they're, because you go from a ravine to the hill. I mean, my neighbors did it, and with a permit, but not from the DEC. With our old
Where they
permit.
get the permit from? The Corps?
Oh, our old permit guy who is fascinating.
From the village.
Oh, okay. Okay. Along the line of public education, for those handful of property owners that live south of Worley or south of the creek, they need to be educated on proper septic maintenance so that their septic systems are cleaned regularly and, to maintain their life expectancy. Potential improvements along Oak Grove or at Island Park should be undertaken in a manner that does not invite entry to private lands. Maintaining water flow in the west branch of Ellicott Creek would also help deter unpermitted access. So the LWRP is recognizing that that's a problem that needs to be recognized. And then the last one was support more activity on Main Street. Are there things that could happen, whether it's restaurants or kayak rentals or bait sales or those types of things that could happen on Main Street that would go hand in hand with the waterfront and public park uses? So maybe this is a question.
What bait are you selling?
Pardon me?
What bait are you selling?
I don't know. What, minnows, worms?
Minnows.
Whatever
Worms.
people use to catch
More
fish.
worms. I'm terrified of worms now. We have the Asian jumping worms on the island, and I'm afraid it's going to spread to other shorelines. I haven't seen them on any of the other shorelines. It's going to cause.
What is an Asian jumping worm?
Oh, they're evil.
How
They
big
are. Amenthus is the genus, and there's a couple of the species that have come in, and I found them last spring, and happened to be working. Thank you. Screening with some landscapers, and one of her friends had found this strange thing going on at the Japanese gardens, and had asked her about it. And she's like, "Oh, I just learned about this." So they have them there, and I guess in Olmsted too. And they eat a tremendous amount and grow and reproduce. So in one, you can get like 200 in a square meter easily.
They said that, I Googled it on my phone. They arrived from Southeast Asia, and they believe they came in potted plants, nursery stock and soil.
That makes sense.
And they are invasive. They're in several states. They are a problem in Nebraska. But there's a picture of one. It almost looks like a giant night crawler with that kind of.
They're a little bit different than a night crawler, because I get those too, but they're not as quite as they can get big, but not until the end of the season. They're an annual worm.
Yeah.
Over winter. Now this year we had a late frost, and that seems, I think, has helped a little bit, because I have fewer this year so far, but we'll see what happens throughout the season.
Right.
There's a guy at UB that does a lot of research on them that I know, and I've been talking to him about looking at it, because what happens is that they turn the soil into like coffee grounds.
Wow.
And then it washes away. That's my concern, is that on the shoreline, we're going to have big issues with erosion, because it's
stop them
away. I think that the dam actually helps us in this situation, because they don't go down below the water line.
Oh.
So since they're only active in the summer, I think that probably helps overall, but it doesn't help with any high flood issues that happen, that go above the kind of average high water mark.
It says that if you disturb it, it's like a night crawler on steroids. It wiggles.
Oh yeah, my son was trying to, for his photography class, he was trying to get pictures of it. They flop around. It's really impressive. I mean, they'll automatically like split apart.
Yep.
I mean, you can tell where they get their names from. I mean, normal worm will like go away. These guys are crazy.
Yeah, but they say that they can significantly alter habitat and decrease biodiversity.
It's a really,
Very
I've
damaging.
never seen something have this much impact. It's because they release all the nutrients in the fall, which is the worst time because it's a time when plants can't use them.
Right.
So, or most plants can't, right?
So this is a new invasive in the area, and it's not a plant.
Yeah. So our property was one of the first. I'm sure it's been around, but our property
Yeah.
was one of the first ones to report it on iNaturalist. But that was at the same time when they found it in the parks. I think it came in on. Somebody convinced me to bring in compost from a commercial company, which I never do.
Mm-hmm.
But
And you think that's how you got them?
I think so.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. All right. And then I had 3 other thoughts just thrown out there. Are there any additional structures in the waterfront area that I need to go back and look at the list of stuff? I didn't take the time to do it, but I need to go back into the inventory and look at the list and see if there were any structures that maybe we want to recognize or for local or state and national designation.
Did you look at the historic? I think you did, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, the village has
because they identified a bunch of them, and then they just. Yeah. I don't know if it passed. I missed the meeting on Monday, but they were just putting on the rest of the walls, Eschner's walls. Those are within the.
They approved 11 out of the 13 nominated.
Oh yeah, which ones did you not approve?
I think it was 2 residents, Cheryl, that wanted to have the opportunity to speak to the board members in person. We're not comfortable about participating in a Zoom meeting. Is that correct, Keaton?
Yeah. Yeah, there was one homeowner who he wrote a letter and asked that that the decision be waived until we could do an in-person meeting. So
was that one of the walls or the hitching posts?
I believe that was the hitching post.
I'm sorry.
The wall vote, that actually came up no. So, yeah.
They didn't protect the walls?
Yeah. So the walls came up no.
Interesting.
What walls?
All the walls that were built by Ignaz Eschner.
Same person who built the castle that showed.
Oh, okay. All right. And where are those walls?
There's one on Mill. And is it Oak Grove?
So there's one
no,
on
there's no on
I know
Oak Grove.
those homeowners are not convinced that was because their house was built in the 50s, but I mean just the character of it is so much like it. There's one on Mill. There is an entire structure over by the convent on Rice.
North Lawn.
Yeah. Okay.
And the North Lawn, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And then it was suggested creek maintenance. Oh, wait, I jumped ahead. Sorry. The next one was someone suggested installing lighting to enhance views of the falls in Glen Park in the evening. Yeah. But I don't know what the hours of operation for the park are. Doesn't it close at dusk?
It closes at 10, actually.
At 10?
Yeah, there's actually those old school lampposts that you see on some streets. I think Oak Grove has.
So
there's some lampposts in there. It's still lit after dark, but yeah, it closes at 10.
Can we stipulate dark sky lighting?
Of course. Well, I don't know what. See, this is. I want to say it was Pete Warren, I think, is the one who mentioned this, and he, I think, was thinking about spotlights, putting spotlights on the falls. I don't know if that would be a great idea. And I don't know if the people who live on the east side, the eastern shoreline, would be appreciative of that.
And didn't Keaton, wasn't there just an issue about, I want to say, obnoxious lighting or something very recently before the board?
Correct. Yeah, the village. So it's actually perfect timing to talk about it. The village just passed an offensive lighting code.
So this is probably not a good idea.
Well, we'd have to comply with our own code. You know,
Yeah.
it couldn't be
I mean,
too
dark
bright,
sky lighting would be,
ambient light pointed directly at the neighbor's house, et cetera. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's ways of doing lighting now,
Hmm.
so that you get less ambient push, you know. if
Yeah.
you're
I
not-
think any of the dark sky lighting
Yeah,
would,
dark sky, right.
So-
be compliant and would serve the
Yeah.
need. I mean, when you look at places like the High Line that are fully done in dark sky, you can, like, it's great when you're on it and you can barely see it otherwise.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
But
what we would.
if these were to be some kind of lighting that's focused out toward the falls, so you're illuminating it in the evening, I'm not sure how you do that and keep that.
There's
dark
no way
sky.
to do that. It would be
Well,
only, but I think in the parks.
Yeah, it can't be
the
dark
idea
sky
of
compliant
putting in dark
because
sky lighting, I think, is a great option if they're going to be. I think that it generally, I think, in my personal opinion, is improve the ambiance. But then again, this is like something my husband and I fight about all the time.
right.
No,
But I
not full on
I
fight.
actually think that the lighting in the park right now would be considered dark sky compliant because it's got a covered top. The lighting
Depends on
element
whether or
itself is
not the
inside.
bulb is all the way in the inside of the covered top.
Yes, right. Yep. So, okay. And then the last one, someone suggested creek maintenance at the falls. Trim the low hanging branches, remove logs and log jams. And I don't know, to me, that's just part of the natural system.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to go in there and start,
They do some of that, don't they?
I don't know.
They do that, yeah. I mean, if it's interrupting flow, I mean, if you've got,
Right.
I mean, people throw stupid stuff in there. You know, people will throw, orange cones in there, and we'll have to fish them out. So I mean, if there's stuff that's
coming down all the time.
if it's obtrusive to the natural environment, yeah, we'll go in there, we'll fish stuff out.
Right. So we
for the
don't really
most
need
part,
this one.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Any other thought? One thing I didn't put on here that I had originally on my list was when we were walking through Glen Park and we went up toward the back of the park, there was a pond and it had been lined and the liner was all full of crap and it was a big mess. And it was a perfect project to remove the liner and clean up the area. But I remember at the last meeting or 2 meetings ago, Ben said it had all been done. That they took the liner out and they didn't even need a liner to hold water. The pond filled up on its own. And I guess they fixed the culvert pipe that goes across to the drainage ditch that was on the other side. I've got it on my list of things to do. I want to take a drive up there and look at it. Because the other side, the drainage ditch, got all overgrown with Phragmites because it wasn't getting good flow from the pond. But Ben indicated it was all fixed. So I'll go look and make sure.
Okay.
So that was it. Anything else come to mind for anyone?
No, you mentioned everything on my list. Ben sent me a couple things and
Okay,
they're
good.
on your list. So, yeah.
Do these things include things like, I mean, maybe they do have them at, I don't go to Glen Park very often because they don't allow dogs and I always have my dog with me. So, but do they have, there a couple things that I've noticed there. One of them are handrails. Like, I know that they have some handrails, but I remember when I took my mom there and she has balance issues, it was a nightmare getting her around that park. That was really difficult. And the other one, and then finding seating to sit her down. Those are just.
There are benches, but there aren't a lot of them.
Yeah. So there definitely are some, but there's not a lot. There's not a lot of like, places to picnic or things like that. If somebody's using the shelter at Island Park. I mean, I don't know that it has to be anything huge. I mean, the fixing the pathway so that it's easier to navigate would be a big thing.
Yeah.
But usually now I just drop her off at the bottom and then, my dad walks down. But
Oh, yeah, I see. Oh, so when you're coming in from Main Street and coming down the hill, could they install handrails to make it more?
There are handrails most of the way, I think.
Yeah.
But there was some issue with the asphalt or something that made it so that I had to kind of hold on to her, and then it's pretty steep.
Right.
Okay.
It's just inaccessible on that
Yeah,
side.
the steepness, I don't know how you fix that because you're coming down over the
Well,
escarpment.
you'd have to do a terrace, a shallow terrace grade.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So,
As you come around the corner, it gets a little easier when you hit the first pond and all that.
yes.
But
There is one section where it is pretty steep.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, what they did in the California parks when they had those that were but they weren't paved. They would use ties basically, and then use the decomposed granite and just do like shallow steps with with the railroad ties holding in the.
Yeah. So, okay. That's all I had.
Okay.
To really talk about. So but unfortunately, I really wish more people had participated. So we're going to talk about this list again. I think I'll send an email out as a follow-up to this meeting and ask the folks who didn't come to please give me any comments on this list. And then Keaton, we can, try to schedule another meeting.
Yeah.
What
What I'll do is so that when you send out the meeting notes, I'll give you the link to the video, so that if anybody wants to watch the video or just watch little parts of it, whatever they want to do, that way they can. It feels like they were here,
Yeah.
But moving forward, I guess I was looking at the calendar. I don't know if the end of June is too close to this meeting. And then we have the week of the 4th in the way.
Well,
I don't know how many people have plans this year.
I'm not sure what we're going to, what will change in 2 weeks' time in terms
Exactly.
for us to meet and talk about. I mean, we're waiting on the biggest thing is waiting on Chip to get us that whatever information he can come up with and his determination on the Dyson agreement. And it sounds to me like that's going to take a while.
Yeah. Do you want to maybe set it up for July, maybe the week after the 4th?
Yeah, we could
Have a
set a tentative date for something in July and see where we're at.
Where Chip is and where we're at.
I'm going to be, my son is in medical school out in Idaho, and he's going to Long Island to start his 3rd year clinical rotations. And so we have to move him. So I'm going to be gone from the 15th through like the 24th. So either after that or before that,
Thursday, July 9th.
Yeah, we could try that.
Okay. It's about a month. It's a month from today.
Yeah.
Want to do another 6 p.m.?
Can we make it 6:30?
Sure.
Okay. All
I
right.
had one more thought on the ideas. We don't have to talk about it, just to throw it out there because I will forget to email. I know Brian in Amherst is thinking a lot about how to engage green space and things like that. And I'm wondering if there are, I don't necessarily have a concrete idea, but any opportunities to improve the ability to use, or maybe it's just interpretive signs or something, but to educate about floodplain, ecosystems, that kind of the habitat that people are walking through. And I mean, most of Amherst State Park is invasives, but there are dogwoods. But I mean, just kind of, it's an interesting kind of habitat that's very different because it's constant, it's so dynamic, and the way things, you could do a lot of interesting science education and things like that would engage people and let them know what they're seeing. I don't know necessarily how you put something in that's meaningful, that's infrastructure versus, you know, education programs. Maybe there's things that would reduce the barriers to those. I don't know.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
I'd hate to have to cut the meeting a little short. We have another meeting that starts.
Yeah, you have a meeting at 7:30, but we're done anyway. So,
Okay.
so I'll put a brief summary together about what we talked about and send it out, and try to let people know that we're thinking of doing this again on July 9th if we have
Yeah.
more to talk about, but try to encourage participation.
Exactly.
You know,
I will.
So I'll say something nice, but yet kind of reprimanding them. So, okay. All right. Well,
All right. Thank you,
know,
everybody.
thanks for joining.
Thank you, Cheryl.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Bye.
I'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye, Wendy.
Bye-bye.